Hi and welcome back to another episode of jPlay. I'm Marcus and I really have to apologize for my long absence again, but I have been quite busy in doing other stuff, for example playing some of the newer games. I focused on Eldritch Horror, I have to confess, so you might expect a playthrough sooner or later, even though there are already relatively high or great bunch of videos out there for this game, but I think I have to do my own. Today I will do a review how to play video for Vikings, Warriors of the North, another game from rebel.pl, which I stumbled upon in Essen last year, 2013. And yeah, I was kind of intrigued of some of the game mechanics in this one here. So it's quite a light game, I have to admit. It plays in, yeah, you can really play it in under an hour if you're good and if everyone knows the rules. But what I like about this game is that there is a high amount of cutthroat element in this game. So for example, if you just plan to move your ship from one space to the other, after each action basically the other players can throw cards in your direction and make your life a hell basically. So this is definitely some type of game I do enjoy a lot. I also like games like with a traitor mechanism like Battlestar Galactica or Shadows over Camelot, you name it. So that's definitely the kind of games I like, and I really like to torture my fellow gamers. Of course, only on the board or at the table. Yeah, so this video will be more or less a rule explanation video. I think I will show you some of the components, but then I dive directly into how to play this game. Maybe I will show you one or two turns or so. I'm not quite sure how I will do that, but you can really expect more or less how to play video than rather just a simple review video, and then you can decide on your own if this would be the right fit for you or maybe not. So let's have a look inside the box and then I will show you how everything works. Let's have a look at some of the components of Vikings, Warriors of the North. I have to say there are not too many components, but the components that are there are relatively decent. So I really like the artwork and the theme of this game here, but don't expect it to be too Ameritrashy in respect to the amount of components here. Here we have some really nice miniatures that represent for once the sea monster and the 4 ships of the player characters. These are the action cards. I think there are nearly 100 cards in this game, so that's definitely not too bad. And this stack consists of wind cards, event cards and hero cards, but I think I will come to that in a second. Each player starts the game with one of these game boards here that represents a Viking ship, and each Viking ship has space for 3 crew members. And these lovely ladies here are more or less the goal of the game. So in order to win Vikings, you have to get 3 of these lovely daughters to your war camp basically, but they have to be of another color than your own player color is. There were discussions on Board Game Geek that told us, maybe the artwork is a little bit too lascivious and not really appropriate. But okay, in the end it's still a game and no one gets raped or stuff like that. So basically what you will do when you get hold of these lovely mates here, you bring them to your war camp and hold a feast. Nothing else, promised. And then of course there is the main game board. The main game board has several of these spaces here, and more or less each of these spaces shows some directions where which you can sail, but I will show that to you to the wind cards. For example, a space like this would only allow you to sail either in that direction or that direction. Then we have the village of Athene, where you would loot the village in order to get hold of the lovely daughters here, and this would be your starting harbor where you will have to bring the mates in order to hold a feast. And this big space here is the starting place for the sea monster, and the sea monsters can be manipulated through several event cards in the game. You can attack the sea monster in order to gain more action cards and stuff like that, but I think I will show you this also in a second. Setting up the game is a pretty straightforward process. Each player chooses the player color, takes the ship in the corresponding column, then each player draws 6 action cards at his starting hand. Of course, this is all hidden information. Then each player puts his ship on his starting location here on the game board. And last but not least, you put the sea monster on his starting location as well at the center of the board. As mentioned, you can win this game by bringing 3 of the 4 daughters to your war camp. For example, if you are the red player, then you have to bring the blue, the light blue and the yellow daughter to your war camp, which would be in this corner location. So for example, you can bring the first daughter, then the second daughter, and then the third daughter. And once this is achieved and your feast is successfully held, then you immediately win the game. Before I explain the sequence of play, I have to explain the different kind of action cards that are available in this game. For example, there are these wind cards, and the wind cards come in 2 flavors. There are these Joker or Wildcard Winds card, which let you more or less sail in any direction. That is a legal move on the game board. And there are wind cards that normally bring you 2 possible directions in order to play them. For example, this wind card over here lets you move either into western or eastern direction, and they show you the corresponding symbol, and these symbols correspond to the game board accordingly. So for example, this wind card here lets you either sail into this direction if that's a legal move, or lets you move in that direction with this icon here. If you would play the wind card on this location, so for example the red player would be on this space here, and we would play this card here, then theoretically this card would move you in this direction, but that's not possible because here are some rocks and you don't want to end up in this set of rocks. So instead of moving in that direction, you can only play this wind card in order to sail into this direction, exactly 1 space. And as mentioned, this wind card over here would let you move in each legal direction. So for example, if the red player would start his turn here, for example, then he would play his wind card here. No one would object to this wind card. Then he could more or less end up here with a sea monster, but there are some additional rules which you need to consider here. He could move down to the south where this village is there, or he could move to the west. I just mentioned it already. You can only end your move on a space containing the sea monster if you still got your free action left. Each player normally has 1 free action, and there are a set of free actions available in this game, but you need to have it available, and in this case you would use your free action in order to attack the sea monster. If you don't have your free action left, then it's not possible for you to sail into the same space as the sea monster. Let's get back to the action cards. The next set of action cards are event cards. Again, they come in 2 flavors here. For once, these are the normal event cards. They are more or less show this little star symbol. All of the event cards are only a single use, and they more or less tell you exactly what you have to do. There's one exception to this rule. You can play the event card either for the card or for the effect that's written at the bottom of the card, or you can use it as a wind card, as most of the event cards show a little wind icon over there. So in this case, you could use this event card also to play it as a wind card and sail into eastern direction. Then there are these reaction cards, and the reaction cards are normally played in order to react. For example, Loki the Trickster here would say reaction, play immediately after another player plays an event card. I explain that in the later step when I explain the turn order, and this says the card is being cancelled, discard both cards. And this goes more or less around in circles, and for example the next player could then object to Loki the Trickster card, which would cancel then the Loki the Trickster cards, and so on. But again, I will explain that later. And then there are the hero cards. Also, they come in 2 different kinds. For once, there is a more or less a once per round usage, which show this symbol here, and this, for example, the navigator shows a reaction after playing one of your wind card. Then you could roll the die. If you roll a success in this game would be a 4 or higher, then you would regain that wind card you just play. Again, other players could object to the dice roll, for example, but again, I will explain that later. The second set of hero cards show a permanent effect, for example, like the guard, who would let you always add 1 to the die roll in battles with a sea monster. So when you attack a sea monster, a 3 would be fine to successfully attack it. Or you could subtract 1 from the die roll when you are being attacked by another player. So for example, to make his life a little bit harder. While wind and event cards are normally just played and being discarded after usage, the hero cards have to be placed on your ship, and you can place exactly one hero card per turn on your ship. And as you see, you only have 3 slots available, and you always have to remember that also the daughter of a Thane also occupies 1 space. So when you really want to carry more than just 1 daughter, you have to be aware that you can only use 1 hero on your ship, but it is allowed to always discard either heroes or daughters from your ship. They would just be given back to the appropriate draw pile or the discard pile for the hero cards. Let's check out the sequence of play. The first thing you would normally do is to draw 2 additional cards from the draw pile. Note, you don't do that during the very first turn, as you still have your starting hand. The next thing that you could do, you could place exactly 1 hero card onto your ship. For example, this rower here, and this rower gives you a reaction after rowing your own ship. Roll a die. On a success, you may row 1 more space. I will explain the rowing also at a later stage of this explanation video. Then the player can do as many actions as he wants to do or as he has cards on his hand. One possible action could be to play a wind card, for example. Let's just assume it's a red player's turn and the red player wants to sail into that direction. So he would play this wind card over here. This would allow him to sail in that direction. Theoretically, he could now directly move into the adjacent space here. But not so fast. After each card that is played, for example a wind card or event card, each player starting in a clockwise direction, so starting with your left neighbor, could now play a event card that says reaction to that. And so for example in this case the yellow player would say, no, I don't want to play an event card here or a reaction card at this point in time. The light blue card would also say, no, I don't want to play a card. But then the blue player would say, yes, I have a card here and I will play this sudden squall here, and this says reaction, play a wind card which was just played. Ignore the wind direction of the wind card, move the longship in a freely chosen direction. So then the next player's turn would be, for example, the red player, and the red player could say, yeah, I do have a reaction card here on my hand as well, and this says Loki the Trickster, play immediately after another player plays an event card. Their card is being cancelled, discard both cards. And then it goes around in circles until each player would pass, and then we would then see what basically here on the deck. So for example, Loki would now cancel the sudden squall here, which would only leave the wind card here, and then in this case the original player, the red player, could move his ship from A to B. If no one would have played Loki the Trickster here, then this card would more or less react on this wind card here. It would not cancel the wind card, but it would let the owner of this card move the ship in any direction he wants. And so, for example, the blue player could move the red player into this direction rather than the other one. Whenever an action is completed, so basically all reactions have been resolved, for example like moving the ship from A to B here, then the other players could also take 1 action after this action here. And this could either be playing an event card from their hand, so for example they could move the sea monster basically to the neighbored space here of the red player. They could also activate a hero on your ship, for example the thief here, and this thief says action, when your ship is in the same space as an opponent ship, roll the die, and on success you could take 2 random cards from the opponent's hand. So in this case it would be red player's turn, red would move into the same space as the yellow player, for example. Then the yellow player says, okay, now your action is done, you move into my space, now I can take an action, and in this case I could activate Thief and try to steal some cards from the red player. Of course, just like with all the other actions, all these cards can be countered again. So for example, if this is a counter action, then again another player could play the power of Thor again, and this would, let's say, modify the die roll here. There are a whole bunch of different other event cards in play or action card that any player could play, like this abundant loot here, take 2 cards, or throw him overboard, play on any ship. The ship owners must throw away one of the ship's crew members, and this card here would let you move the sea monster on any space that's basically not a harbor or does not contain any other player's ship. So this could be a great way to keep the red player from moving into that direction. So rather than going this way, he would then have to take this route or this route. Just with the wind card, you can also more or less block this action. So after a player announced, hey, I want to move the sea monster, then again in clockwise order, starting with the player to your left, each one could play any reaction card on this card. So if the player to your left doesn't want you to move the sea monster again, he could play Loki the Trickster, for example. I think I already mentioned this, but again, any player can play any action cards that he has on his hands basically during his turn, and that's independent if this action is successful or not. So in this example, the red player could first move his ship, then he could play the sea monster, then he could play the abundant loot, and then maybe with the next card he could move his ship again. After each of these cards, any player playing against this player could object by playing any reaction card, for example. Apart from the action that can be triggered by an event card or a wind card, each player also has a standard action. And normally you can do a standard action only once per turn. And these standard actions could be attacking another player, you could attack the sea monster, you could loot a village in order to invite a young daughter to your ship in order to later on host a feast here. And you could also make a sacrifice which give you the opportunity to redraw some of the cards. Let's have a look at these standard actions and start with attack another player's longship. You can attack another player when you are in the same space. So for example, red wants to attack the yellow player here. Then he could announce, hey, as my standard action, note you only have one per turn, I want to attack the yellow player here. Again, now every player could object by playing a reaction card, for example. So there are cards available that would let you evade from a battle. So for example, this evade card here says play before a battle. The battle does not occur if you have been attacked and so on. Again, all the players following by this player who played this evade card could play another reaction card like Loki the Trickster. So for example, if you have a mean fella sitting to your left, he wants to see you die, then he could again play Loki the Trickster and then the battle would occur. The attack itself is pretty simple. The attacking player would roll a die, and with a result of 4 or higher, the attack was successful. And this was a pretty good example. So in this case, the attack was not successful. In this case, the defender takes one card at random from the attacker's hand and is also allowed to draw one additional card from the normal draw pile. So under certain circumstances, it can be pretty cool to be attacked by another player, especially when he blew the roll. One additional thing the defender could do or has to do is move the attacker one space away from your space. Of course, it needs to be a legal direction, so he could not move the red player into this area because of the rocks here, but he could move him in any direction, whatever, south, north or east. One additional thing, you cannot move the losing opponent into the space of the sea monster. If the attacker rolls a 4 or a 5, then this means this is a victory for the attacker. In this case, the attacker draws at random one card from the defending player's hand and is also allowed to draw one card from the normal draw pile. And in this case, the attacker would move the defender one space ahead, of course, again into a legal space, which does not contain the sea monster and of course is not blocked by these rocks here or so. If the attacker rolls a 6 or higher, how can you roll higher than 6? Of course, there are also modification cards in this game, like the special ability of the Berserker, which lets you add 1 to your die roll when you attack another player, or Power of Thor here, that would say play before any die roll, add or subtract 1 to the result. So for example, the attacking player could play Power of Thor, maybe it's not been cancelled by Loki the Trickster or so. In this case, he could add 1 to any die roll here. So in this case, the attacking player would have rolled a 7. But coming back to the 6 or more here, this means a glorious victory for the attacker. In this case, you would normally apply the same effects like with a roll of a 4 or a 5. So you could draw a card and draw a card from the draw pile. But additionally, he can take one crew member from the defending player's ship, like this rower here or the daughter of the Thane. And then he could decide if he wants to take this crew member onto his ship or he wants to more or less throw him overboard. In this case, the rower would go to the discard pile and the daughter would go back to the normal draw pile of the Thane. Definitely, she's not going to be harmed. The next standard action would be to attack the sea monster. Again, you have to have your standard action still available, so you cannot move into the space of the sea monster if you don't have any more standard action left, and this means to be voluntarily or involuntarily, so if you're not able to fight the sea monster, you can never enter its space. The attack on the sea monster is pretty the same like you would attack another player's ship. You would roll a die, and on the roll of 4 or higher your attack was successful. If the roll was successful, let's just consider he rolled a 4 here, then the player would be able to draw 2 cards from the draw pile, and then he could move the sea monster onto any other space that does not contain a ship or another captain, or this space does not have to be a harbor or a player camp. If the attacking player loses the fight, or if the fight is cancelled beforehand because of playing a reaction card, again, all these standard actions can be countered by any reaction card. In this case, the attacking player's ship would be moved back to the space where it came from before it attacked the sea monster. An additional standard action would be to loot a village. You can only loot villages that are of a different colors than yours. So in this case, the red player wants to loot the yellow Thane here. Again, all the players could react on this loot action, and if no one does react, or if the reaction more or less is being cancelled again by maybe Loki the Trickster or whatsoever, then the player can add the yellow daughter as a crew on his ship. Again, if all the spaces are filled again, then first of all he needs to make room. So for example, throwing crew members overboard in order to make space for this lovely daughter here. After looting a village, the red player could go or sail back into his own harbor here, so at his camp, and then he would announce a feast action. If this feast action again is not counted, then he is allowed to relocate the yellow daughter, or the daughter from the yellow Thane, into his war camp, and as soon as he has 3 different colors in his war camp, he would immediately win this game. Note, he's not allowed to have 2 daughters of the same kind in his war camp, so he would not be allowed to move, let's say, a second yellow daughter into his war camp. It's also important to mention that this war camp is really a safe harbor, so no card effect whatsoever will ever affect this war camp here. So once you have placed a daughter legally onto your war camp, she's safe there. And the last standard action would be the sacrifice action. In this case, the player could discard a pair of cards from his hand, and for each pair that he discarded, he's allowed to draw 1 new action card from the draw pile. One last thing that a player could always do as his very last action is the row action, and the row action would let you move your ship basically 1 space to an adjacent sector. So in this case, the red player just brought hold a feast in his war camp, and then he would say, I would go and hunt for another daughter, and as I'm a row action, I will move into that area here. This is not possible, as you can see that here, and this would immediately end his turn. If this player has at the end of the turn more than 6 cards on his hand, he would have to reduce back to 6 cards. But to be honest, that's a very unlikely situation during your turn, because you're really using your cards so extensively in this game that you're really running through the draw deck very quickly. So in this case, I think these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 6 cards, 1 is just being discarded, and then the next player's turn would start. And that's basically it. The rules themselves are relatively straightforward and relatively easy. Of course, you always have to remember, okay, hey, when can I play a reaction card? Don't forget that I can do an action after another player has taken a successful action. All these stuff can be countered by other event cards and stuff like that. But that's really something you get to know pretty soon. What's really challenging in this game is finding the right strategy. So when should I play this Power of Thor? When should I cancel an event card with Loki the Trickster? When should I move the sea monster, or when should I let someone else throw away some crew members and stuff like that. So this is really challenging, even though the winning conditions, bringing 3 daughters of different colors to your war camp, seem to sound very easy, but it's definitely not. And this is really a game you have to play quite often in order to get behind all these kind of mechanics. Even though the game is really easy, I really like this game. For once, the artwork is just awesome. I really love the style of the drawings. I love these cool Viking warriors and stuff like that. So this is really for once. And on the other hand, the deep strategy and tactic maneuvers you can play in this game. So it's really relatively cutthroat, this game, so you never know what each other player has on its hand, and you would really think, okay, yeah, it should be easy to move 2 spaces ahead, but sometimes it can be pretty difficult. And this brings me already to the end of my review or rule explanation video here. Hopefully everything was clear enough, so not too detailed and not too many spoilers in there, so that I haven't shown you all the cards, and this is really fun to look at these cards and find out what these actually are, but still deep enough to let you decide if this would be the right game for you. I hope to see you soon in one of my next videos, and until then, bye bye.